when is your dad gonna let me be your husband?
Oh wow, wow. My dad not letting you be great. He not letting you
Nah,
be great.
nah. It's interesting. Absolutely no issues with your dad, with your mom, stepmom, anybody.
Yeah,
I love them. I know we love each other. What happens is when somebody new comes into the picture, and I don't know if they think it's taking over, but we've had some experiences where it just felt like
don't be talking about my daddy. First of all, like let's get that
I ain't
straight.
talking about your dad. I know I love him. You know I love him. Cool guy. I love hanging out with him. But this dynamic doesn't just happen with us. One of my neighbors, we talk about it all the time with his in-laws and how to navigate being a husband to a wife whose dad is involved, who's
Yeah,
in the picture, who's been consistently protective of their daughter. Would you consider yourself a daddy's girl?
yeah, to a certain extent. I
Okay.
love my dad to death.
Hmm.
He's always been there for me, and he's always been the one I call for everything.
Hmm. Hmm.
Even in previous relationship, like so, it has been.
Mm. I just felt something. Can I talk about it? I just felt something. Welcome to the Win Love Alliance podcast. We're your co-hosts, Bashea and Tara Williams. The purpose of this podcast is to challenge the narrative, disrupt the status quo, while being a voice of reason for singles, couples, families in the black community.
And for healthy, practical, and unconventional ways to heal, build, and grow your relationship, join us weekly here on the Win Love Alliance podcast. Oh my gosh. Yes.
You saying he's always been the one that you call on. I remember that happened when we first got married.
Hmm.
You would call your dad to do something when I was right there.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm
Like,
like,
but like we just said in previous podcasts, like it's work after the wedding. Like you
yeah.
still have to do this transition into what life is like now.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean you automatically snap out of it
Hmm.
and say, hey, da 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 da. Like, you can't erase those 40 something years for a year, you
Hmm.
know? And so it was a process of me transitioning. Yeah, I mean, I would call him because that's who I always call. And
Hmm.
it wasn't that you couldn't do it, it wasn't that you're not capable. I think it was just like this built in, oh, well, daddy know the person that can call for this, or he's been putting the curtain up, he can do the curtain. Um, but also, too, being that my dad and I have that relationship and we're close, is that my dad, I felt like, he enjoyed doing those things.
Hmm.
And so I looked at it from a standpoint of all of that stops for him.
Hmm.
You know, he enjoyed coming to help me with stuff. If the wind blew at 2 o'clock in the morning, I thought somebody was trying to break in. He's walking around my house with his gun. Like,
Hmm.
so you you know, I know it was hard kind of transitioning to that, but I also looked at it as he was losing some things that he liked to do too. And I
Hmm.
didn't want that necessarily to happen, so I still was trying to keep it inclusive, you
Hmm.
know. But also understanding that I have you now,
Hmm.
and I can pimp you out and use you for whatever. No, I'm just saying. But having that understanding that hey, my husband can handle it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Inclusive. That's interesting you use that word because I didn't feel inclusive.
Yeah, I know, but from the perspective of what the question was, is that I still wanted him to feel that way. That's why I was going to him, that answering your question, and I understood how you didn't feel connected within that
Hmm.
that dynamic.
Hmm.
Um, and I also thought about like no other person that I've been with in previous relationship had a relationship like that, like you have with my family.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Everybody loves you. They enjoy being around you. They have a relationship with you. And even though I was in other relationships, I did not have that
Hmm.
peace. So it took some getting used to for them as well.
Hmm.
And it's no disrespect or disregard for who you are, they value you
Mm-hmm.
and they appreciate you. Because I look at, even in blending families, it's just not about the in-laws, right? It's about your entire family. So I have siblings, my daughter, his son. And one thing that I really loved that my husband did, is when we got married, we would start having brunches at our house on Sundays. And this enabled my younger brother, whether he wanted to admit it or not, my baby brother, Garnett, my sister Ayani, we had the same father, to start coming over and spending time. And my oldest brother George in New York would come down. And so you created that really, like, getting together family dynamic, and that drawing us all closer. Even with my other two siblings, like, it was just so special for me, and I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
And I still enjoy it and value you for it. So I thank you for it, but never feel. And I'm not discounting your feeling, because I see how you felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
So let me say that. I don't want to say never feel. Never say never feel.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say that it was a hard place for me too.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, and for me, and I thank you for sharing that. And I had to come to grips and understand that for myself, because at times you couldn't see it, and like you said, you were just trying to include him. You're still protecting your relationship. You still wanted him to feel some sort of value in that role in the relationship. Me, I'm thinking like we can do things together. I shouldn't be surprised by different things, and so I got, I took it personal,
yeah,
right? Because I'm coming in and saying this is my role, and I need to understand that Dad's still involved, which is fine. But I just didn't want Dad to replace, and didn't think that he still needed to do those same things.
yeah,
And so the work that I did is having the conversations, and we thrive in community. So talking to my homeboy about it and seeing that he had the same experience, and then coming to you and saying, hey, at first I was offended by this, but now I understand where it's coming from. But I need us to do something about this, because one thing I can do is be quiet. And what does that build? Resentment, anger. Then I'm so totally disconnected from you, and something comes up. Oh, Dad got it, so I'm out.
yeah.
And so now, what does that build?
That's
It
operating.
created
That's
a create a
operating. Being
divide.
petty. That's low key
That's
petty.
not. That's not being petty. That's not being petty
Like
at
for
all.
you to say, "Oh, I'm out. Dad can do it."
You see what's happening? You see what's happening? You see what's happening?
I'm not gonna let him use that.
You see
I'm
what's
not
happening?
gonna.
So
He over here
again,
remixing y'all.
if it continues to happen, like at some point, there's a pattern that's being created.
Yeah.
And so I can continue to buck the system, or I can go with the system that you think works best.
Yeah.
Right? And so me stepping out of it, so I'm out of harm's way, it's a protection mechanism. Especially if I bring it up and say, hey, this offends me, this doesn't feel good, like, can we do something different? And you continue to do that, I'm going to get out of the way, so that can continue to happen without me trying to force my position as your husband in that role around the house or doing certain things. So whether it's comfortable or not, that's what it is.
So give me a way that you feel that was corrected.
Well, when I had the conversation, I think the last time, because we got the basement done, right? And we had spoken about it before, and I guess they came over and it was like, good job, Tar, good job, Tar. And you kept saying, Bashea did all of this. Bashea did the blah, 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 but he did all of this. And it was still like, good job, Tar. And I just started laughing. And then I sent you a text message, and I said, I was like, laughing out. Yeah, thank you. Laugh out loud. I said, I heard you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And they still said it. But then you had to have a conversation with them to really talk to them about how that shows up.
Yeah. Because I know that they haven't experienced me any other way. Right? And although we've been married for 2.5 years now, it was still like I had been in that house, for almost 10 years. And I think they looked at it as, this is Tar, kind of like from the beginning, like, who is he?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, I've never had anyone like you that had such interface with my family and FaceTime with my family. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, how long is gonna? And not that I was just out there had crappy relationships, but it was also, you know, you're here to stay, and that's a process, for them too, fearing knowing my relationship history, and not blaming anyone. I wasn't always right. They weren't always right, but they weren't always there.
Mm-hmm.
Even in long relationships, the person I was seeing was still not a present like you.
And here's the thing: two things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely.
They can be experiencing that and thinking that and protective, and I can still be experiencing their protection that's actually hurting me.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I totally respect
while I
that.
understood that, it still hurt.
Yeah.
It still bothered me, still made me angry until I got to the point where it's like, all right, this is what it is. My value isn't tied to their response. My value as a husband isn't tied to what I'm experiencing. And I just had the conversation.
Yeah.
Because so many different things were needed to be blended, right? We're talking about our kids, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole different lifestyle, even for my son. Like, he's been around people that I dated before.
Yeah. And that was
And
like
I had to apologize to him
Yeah.
for having people around, because that's something that I shouldn't have done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, it wasn't random people. It was people I thought was going to be a long-term relationship, whether I paid attention to the signs or not. But he shouldn't have met some of
You
those
was
people.
making red flags, checker flag.
Yeah, I was. And I was really, but here's one of the things, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was in a place, I was so desperate for my son to see a unit.
A healthy unit. Yeah.
Just a unit. It
Yeah.
wasn't even about
Oh, okay.
healthy. I was so desperate that I wanted him to be able to come home and see his dad in a relationship with a woman, and so he has an example of what that relationship looks like, right? Because me and his mom, we weren't together
Yeah.
since he was like one,
Yeah.
so he's never seen that. So you talk about thirsty, you talking about parched.
Yeah.
I was just like, all right, telling myself I need to make this unit. I need to show him what healthy marriage looks like. I need to show him these different things. And so I was so pressed to have a partner. And sometimes I dated women who looked like they had the capacity to show up as a healthy partner or a mother that I thought was a good mother, that we can have a good partnership.
Yeah.
And so I dated single mothers because of that. Oh, they understand the whole process of having a child.
But do you think you wanted him to see you as a husband too?
Yeah, that's what I said.
That was a blending our children. Ava's grown and she's out of college. Nicholas is entering into high school, and so keep in mind, I never dated a man that had children. Seriously, anyway, you know what I mean? So I never had to navigate that. And then I was single mom, and it was just my daughter's father wasn't in her life, and she has a relationship with the last person I was with. But my point is that blending with Nicholas, I was fearful, like, okay, you shared your previous relationships that weren't always that good, and I'm sure he saw some things, like you said, you got to apologize to him for that. So I was like, maybe he's looking at me like, hey, is she even going to be around? Like, what's she going to be about? So the warm-up was a little slower than I thought it would be. And so that was like a process too, because I always wanted a son, but I never had any more kids after Ava. So you having a son was awesome. You know what I mean? Any child you had would have been awesome, but you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it just was like, okay, the warm-up is a little different, it's a little slower, but then I thought about those things too. And I think we have to think about not just ourselves in the midst of blending families. Everybody is going through a transition and process. Everybody has a certain level, like you were saying, you were hurting from that, and I apologize for that, because I don't ever want you to hurt behind anything that we are doing or I am doing. But also, I see for other family members may have a mourning process, in the midst of all of this, like my parents may be hurt because maybe I'm not around as much because we're doing stuff. They have a hurting too. Nicholas may have a hurting. Ava had her, and Ava was very, transparent about, hey, I want to come. I want to go on trips with you all. I don't, hey. So when we started doing the family trips, so I think we were in that period of, hey, it's us. We doing this, that, and the other because our kids are older, and the times that Nicholas is at his mother's and Ava is gone, we're doing our own thing, but they're still seeing it.
One of the things that I had a very transparent conversation with Nicholas, and I talked to him about, like, I asked him, I said, what have I taught you about relationships?
Yeah.
What did you see? And I was surprised with his answer. His answer was, you taught me that I didn't have to stay in a relationship if it wasn't healthy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, I did? Because I felt like I stayed in relationships too long.
But he didn't know that.
But he didn't know that. So I shielded him from certain things. Although he met some people, he didn't see a lot of the things. But it was important for me to get his perspective and his understanding.
Yeah.
And so even as I started to pursue you, I didn't mention you as that's somebody I'm dating right away. Mm-hmm. I didn't mention you as this is who I'm in a relationship with right away.
Yeah.
After some months after therapy, I then went to him and I said, hey, this is somebody I'm taking seriously, and this is what I see in the future, and this is what I'm going towards. Mm-hmm. I asked him, was he okay? Mm-hmm. I asked him what he thought, because he had met you professionally or in some other spaces.
Yeah.
So I valued his input.
I didn't meet Nicholas till after we were dating.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, I talked to him about it.
Yeah.
And so we were in a different place where we had open communication and what that looks like.
Yeah.
And even during the transition, you talk about my ego with the move in. Mm-hmm. Here I am thinking about when I allow people to live with me. Mm-hmm. So he experienced that.
Yeah.
And so I had to check myself. And that was another thing. It's like, I'm getting into a scenario. I'm not married, but I'm living with somebody.
Yeah.
What example am I setting for my son?
Yeah.
We had to have that conversation and what that looks like and why it's happening.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I'm moving this girl in because she lost her job. She needed help. Yeah. No, it was a situation where we are engaged. Yeah. We are planning our wedding. Committed, and we are getting married.
Yeah.
So here's what it looks like going forward.
Yeah.
So it was a different process. And I wanted a daughter too. So it was like the perfect merger to me.
That's
but it was
another
still
alignment piece. Yeah.
It was, but it still was a conversation that we needed to have about what does that look like. Like I went to Ava, and I talked to her, and I asked her how she felt, what she thought. Mm-hmm. I asked her for permission, as well as your dad and your brother and your mom. I asked everybody permission, and I asked her how should I show up, and what do you expect, and how can we have a relationship, and all those different things. It's important because it is a transition, an adjustment for everybody. Yeah. Like it was just me and Nicholas in my place, and it was just you and Ava, and she was at college, but when she was home, it was just y'all two.
Yeah.
And so we had to make sure that we both had time with our children separately, in addition to everybody's together. Yeah. It was so beautiful. You look at our wedding pictures, we look like we've been together forever. Yeah. Right? If you look at some of the things that we did, thank God, we just blended well.
Yeah, we did. It wasn't this heavy lift. And, I love your family to death. They are wonderful. Your mom's on a prayer call with me every morning, and my mom, Papa Paul always calls me, and we chat, and he, would love to spend more time with our families too. Mm-hmm. And I think we make an effort to do that when we had these events at the house. Mm-hmm. But I think for families that are blending, that working towards being blended families, everybody needs to be involved in the conversation. Mm-hmm. Of course, you and your spouse or soon-to-be spouse have the initial conversation, but everybody, when it gets serious and the tone is set, everybody needs to be involved in the conversation about what it looks like now that the union is formed and what you can expect, because it's only fair.
Right. Everybody that has healthy input.
Yeah.
Right. We not everybody gets access, right? You
Yeah.
got some people who do not deserve access
Yeah.
to your relationship and where you're going.
Yeah.
Not everybody gets invited to the wedding, and not everybody gets invited and stays in your marriage. So create those
Family
boundaries,
included.
family included. But what's beautiful is being able to communicate to both sides. Like,
Yeah.
we joke about this, but this is a serious thing, and we tested this out. So when I called my dad, he's like, "Hey, what's up?" As soon as he hears her in the background, "Hey,
Yeah.
hey."
That is
The same thing for her mom.
with, like when we call my mom and I'm like, "Hey, Masha, hey, Tar," then Bashea will say, "Hey, Mama Nita." Hey, Bashea. It's like the
Yeah.
energy shifts.
Yeah.
So our families do have, love for one another and us, and that is so funny because I'm so glad you brought that up.
And our parents are around the same age, so they
Yeah.
hang out. Like my dad and her dad, they go
When
off
they
to the
come
side
over.
and talk and
When they come
do
over,
whatever and do their own thing.
Yeah.
It's so funny to see the interaction, and it's so important that they
Yeah.
do have that interaction in that relationship.
Yeah.
And that's a blessing because not
Yeah.
everybody experiences that.
No.
Right? We didn't have the negative experience from in-laws. We don't have
Yeah.
those traumatic conversations. We had to have a necessary conversation.
Yeah.
Now we talk about red flags and the difference between red flags and a conversation. All it was a conversation, and me having to get out of my own way and really understand where it comes from, and her having to have the conversation
Yeah.
instead of ignoring it or instead of just operating in that. But that's a part of the family growth and the family
Yeah,
dynamic
that's-
and
yeah.
adjustment to getting to where we are.
And having that conversation with my dad and my stepmom about, hey, when you say those things, I do appreciate it because, yes, we are here together. However, he's doing this. So they acknowledged that and they said it's fair and they understood and, that's not their intent. But always, intent is different than impact.
Yep.
So, that's something to be acknowledged. And it's funny because I had conversation. I remember we were planning our wedding and my mom was going through chemo. And we thought that she was going to be done with her chemo in enough time to at least heal up and come to the wedding because it's still COVID. And then it got extended and she wasn't going to be able to come, so we had to do Zoom where she could still be a part of the wedding and reading scriptures. And the process was hard, I think, for me and her during that time because, she was she was angry, going through chemo and not being able to be at the wedding, but also saying, why are you rushing? Why can't you all just wait to have the wedding next year when I can come and you haven't even known Bashea that long. And I knew that wasn't coming from a place of her disliking you.
Right.
It was coming from a place
that was
of
y'all stuff.
I can't be there. I'm upset. Why aren't you waiting for me to be there? It's your wedding day. We didn't want to wait, but also in the midst of all of that, I saw her pain, even though it hurt me as well. But I later circled back and had a conversation and said, I've been in relationships before for years with just a ship blowing in the wind with no destination, no port stops, nothing. And I said, I'm now with someone in a healthy relationship that is truly
intentional.
Yes, and present. And I've known him a year and he knows what he wants. And that is me and our family. I said, but what I've shown you all is that I will stay in something that doesn't have any attachment, that still keeps our relationship the same, right? And access to me the same, so it doesn't impact you. But now I'm moving into a marriage and with someone that loves me and is intentional and is actions are speaking, not his words. And it's like almost they feel as though, hey, I'm losing Tara as opposed to gaining you. And that was a process for everybody.
Yeah, and I think you talked about something that's very important, right? As they were going through that, my natural instinct is to come in and save. And I think we do that with good intentions, but the impact and what happens is sometimes comes off negative, right? My position in that particular time was to understand how they operate and respect how they operate and be present for her after those conversations, right? Whatever she needed, I needed to ask, what do you need from me at this particular moment? And that personalized what they're experiencing. Because again, sometimes we come in and try to save and we make the things what's happening worse. So now what I did was, and I don't even know if your brother ever told you, I called him, I said, hey, how do I navigate this?
What do you mean?
Like when you guys were going through that conflict, it was like, this is a lot.
Which George?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like this is, he was like, I'll tell you what I do. Just don't even worry about it. I was like, okay. So this is kind of like the dynamic when when things, that's how they go through their process.
Yeah.
So I didn't personalize it and say to myself that I'm not needed here. I can't fix this. I can't do this. This is blah blah blah. I didn't create this whole storyline. I just was there when how she needed me to be. Right? And she does the same thing. Like we all have our experiences with our family. We can't expect them to have the same relationship that we have with our family.
Yeah.
Because that's unfair. And we can't expect them to replace family, right?
Yeah.
We can't expect that different things. We are creating our own family dynamic. We are creating our own love story, but we can't force that to happen.
Yeah. So, as we always say, let's continue this conversation. Where can they find us, babe?
On our Facebook page, When Love Aligns, we have more conversations like this, and we'll get everything you need around healthy relationships, communication, understanding, blended families, all of that. Join us.
Thank you so much for joining us. And if you'd like to continue to be a part of conversations like this, of course, tune in weekly. But head on over to our When Love Aligns Facebook group to stay connected with a community of like-minded individuals, all in the search of healthy relationships.